Do you know the player who built professional darts and was then erased by it? The pub thrower, a working class man with a trade, a local league team and a dartboard on a pub wall, defined what a darts player was for over 50 years, and today that archetype no longer exists. No coaching, no academy, no structured pathway, just a pint, a chalk blackboard, and a willingness to compete for money that couldn't be lost. That was not an unusual background in this sport. That was the background, and here is exactly how it ended and what filled the space it left behind. To understand what got lost here, you need to know what the sport looked like when the pub thrower was at the centre of it. Joiners, plasterers, tunnellers, miners, these were the occupations that built professional darts. Industrial England produced them in numbers. London's East End, the Midlands, Yorkshire, the mining towns of Scotland. Nobody picked up a dart because they wanted to be a professional athlete. The dart was already there, in the pub, on a Wednesday night, and somebody needed a fourth. The pub was not just a convenient venue. It was the entire infrastructure of the sport, which meant when the pub started dying, the infrastructure died with them. Matches kicked off at 8:45 in the evening. Home team supplied the chalker, who tracked scores and running totals on a blackboard. The board itself hung at 5 feet 8 inches from the floor to the centre ball, with the throwing line at 7 feet 9 1/4 inches, the exact measurements used at Alexandra Palace today. Losers bought a round, money matches were common, and in London especially, players would move from pub to pub in a single evening, competing for whatever they could win. Bobby George, the man who invented the theatrical walk-on in professional darts, described this world in his own words. "We'd travel around to different pubs in East London and try to win a few bob at the darts. It was like an apprenticeship back then. It's how we made a few quid. Essentially, it was like getting paid to go on a pub crawl. That was the pipeline, and it ran in a straight line upward. Pub team fed into Super League fed into county fed into national. The British Darts Organisation, founded on the 7th of January 1973 by Ollie Croft in Muswell Hill, North London, formalised that entire pyramid, with 66 member counties covering England, Scotland and Wales, each fielding men's and women's teams in the British Inter-County Championships. The system earned a description that proved accurate for decades: the production line of darts. Underneath all of it sat the news of the World Individual Darts Championship, which had run continuously since 1927 and started in individual pubs, one player per pub, qualifying upward through district, then area, then regional, then the national final. By 1938, entries had reached over 280,000. Patrick Chaplin, the leading academic historian of darts, called it the individual darts tournament, the championship of the people, the one major darts contest that the ordinary man or woman could win. That was the foundation, and the players it produced are almost impossible to place in the modern sport. Jocky Wilson grew up in a children's home in Fife, Scotland, and spent his working years as a fish processor, a coal miner, and a labourer before walking into the Leicester Bar in Kirkcaldy one night to fill in for a short-handed team. His opponent finished the leg before Wilson had even hit the double to start. 5 hours of daily practice followed for a week, and then Wilson came back and started winning for pints. By 1979, while unemployed, he took £500 at a Butlins holiday camp tournament, and that was the beginning. 2 world championships came after that. When Wilson died in 2012, it was in a one-bedroom council flat in Kirkcaldy, having smoked 50 cigarettes a day and largely disappeared from public life years earlier. John Lowe had never thrown a dart until age 21, having spent his working life as a joiner and carpenter, and yet he won world titles in 3 separate decades: 1979, 1987 and 1993. On the 13th of October 1984, Lowe completed the first televised 9-dart finish in history and won £102,000 in a single afternoon. Tunnelling on the Victoria line of the London Underground occupied Bobby George until his mid-30s, when he took up darts and reached the world final within 2 years, then invented the theatrical entrance that defined how the sport would present itself for decades. Crown, cloak, candelabra, walking out to Queen's "We are the champions." Never a world champion despite reaching the final twice, George reportedly became the first millionaire the sport produced. Eric Bristow's father bought him a dartboard at age 11, and by 15 he was pulling £120 per weekend from pub money matches against a wage of £12 a week at his day job. The job went and Bristow went full-time. 5 world championships followed, the first arriving in 1980 when he was 22. Looking back later, his description of himself was simple. "I was a freak, wasn't I? It was an old man's game, and then all of a sudden you had this kid wiping them out. Phil Taylor's origin story carries more weight than any of the others, because Taylor represents exactly where the old world ended and the new one began. A condemned terraced house in Tunstall, bought for £100, where the family slept downstairs because upstairs was uninhabitable. That was the starting point. School ended at 16 and factory work followed, eventually landing at a job making ceramic toilet roll handles for £52 a week. Darts came late, in his mid-20s, and seriously only after Bristow found him, loaned him £10,000 to quit the factory, and entered him in the 1990 World Championship as a 125-1 outsider. Taylor beat Bristow, 6 legs to 1 in the final. 16 world titles followed that, but every single one of them traced back to a pub in Stoke, where a man with calloused hands from factory work had learned to throw a dart. Taylor's own words on it: "I'm just a working class man who's done well for himself." And broadcaster Sid Waddell, the commentator who gave this entire era its poetry, put it in the line that stays with you: "You can get the dart player out of the pub, but you can't get the pub out of the dart player." The BBC picked up the BDO World Championship in 1978, partly because it filled January schedules cheaply when bad weather had wiped out other sports. Not exactly a ringing endorsement, but the audiences arrived anyway. 8 million people watched John Lowe win in 1979. 8.3 million tuned in for the 1983 final between Bristow and Keith Deller, a 66-1 qualifying outsider who beat the 5-time world champion 6 legs to 5 on live television, and that result felt like the entire argument for why the sport mattered. A complete unknown, from nowhere, beats the greatest player alive in front of 8 million viewers who all understood that it could have been any of them standing up there. By 1983, 23 televised darts events were spread across the BBC and ITV schedules. Bullseye landed on ITV in September 1981 and ran until 1995, pairing amateur pub darts players with quiz contestants in a format that pulled up to 20 million viewers at its peak, with a 5-year waiting list to sit in the studio audience. 20 million people watching pub players on a Saturday night. Jim Bowen, the host, described it plainly: "It was down market, but accessible. Joe Public could identify with my fallibilities." None of this was accidental. The sport worked on television precisely because the heroes were recognizably ordinary, and Patrick Chaplin identified it clearly. It hasn't lost that touch with the ordinary man because it is made up of ordinary men with extraordinary ability. Jocky Wilson looked, as Chaplin put it, like the archetypal bloke from the pub darts team who goes on to be champion of the world. Short, overweight, toothless, and smoking and drinking between throws. The distance between a pub board in Kirkcaldy and the World Championship stage was real, but it was crossable. That credible possibility was the emotional engine of the sport. The first structural blow came from inside, and it started with television. By the late 1980s, tobacco sponsorship had dried up, broadcast priorities had shifted, and the entire darts calendar had been stripped down to a single remaining televised event: one tournament. That was all that survived. Prize money stagnated alongside it, and Ollie Croft's BDO leadership showed no sign of reversing the decline, which meant the top players were watching their earning potential shrink year by year with no remedy coming. On the 7th of January 1993, 16 of the world's top players issued a joint statement and walked away from the BDO entirely, forming the World Darts Council. Bristow, Taylor, Lowe, Wilson, George, Deller, every major name in the sport signed it. The BDO responded with a 57-0 vote, banning all 16 worldwide, and a legal battle expensive enough to damage both sides followed for 4 years, eventually settling in June 1997 when the WDC renamed itself the Professional Darts Corporation, and players were granted freedom to move between organizations. Sky Sports had signed with the Rebel players in 1992, and from December 1993, the PDC World Championship broadcast from the Circus Tavern in Purfleet, a pub-scale venue, behind a subscription paywall. What millions of ordinary working-class viewers had watched for free on the BBC was now gated. The audience that built darts was being separated from the game's best players, and that separation widened every year. Barry Hearn took the PDC chairmanship in July 2001, and the transformation of the sport into arena entertainment accelerated from there. Prize money grew substantially. The World Championship left the Circus Tavern for Alexandra Palace in 2008. Arena shows, laser productions, theatrical walk-ons, and crowd costumes followed, and Hearn was direct about the intention. The whole perception of the sport changes from a pub game. where people in this country especially look down their nose at it. Working class people having fun. It's not really allowed in Britain. The sport was shedding its identity on purpose, and the pub was disappearing at the same time. Approximately 69,000 pubs operated across the United Kingdom in 1980. By 2019, that number stood at 47,200, and by 2025, around 46,000 remain. A net loss of more than 15,000 pubs in a single generation, stripping out the venues where competitive darts lived. At the worst point, in 2009, 52 pubs closed every week. The causes accumulated over years: rising beer duty, cheap supermarket alcohol pricing, shifting social habits. Then, on the 1st of July 2007, England's indoor smoking ban took effect, and the closure rate quadrupled within a year. In 2007 alone, 1,409 pubs shut, against a projected trend of 369. By 2008, 4 pubs a day were going dark permanently, and 175 million fewer pints were drunk in the first 12 months after the ban, with beer sales reported down by over 22% according to the BBPA. None of this was a surprise to people who ran pubs. Before the ban passed, the Federation of Licensed Victuallers issued a warning in 2005 that it would spell the end for thousands of pub darts and pool leagues. That prediction turned out to be accurate, because the smoking ban disrupted something very specific about how darts nights functioned. This was not a sport you could watch for an hour and leave. Matches started at 8:45, teams arrived at 8:30. The culture was built around an entire evening of commitment, and the ban broke that ritual in ways that attendance figures alone don't capture. Sport England's Active People Survey tracked the damage in numbers. Around 119,800 people in England regularly played competitive darts in 2006. By 2016, that figure had dropped to 67,400. A 44% decline across a single decade, while the professional game's viewership was climbing toward records. Through pub closures and Sky paywalls and PDC expansion, the BDO continued to function as the last working connection between pub culture and the World Championship stage. Players drained away to the PDC year after year. Raymond van Barneveld in 2006, Gary Anderson in 2009, Stephen Bunting just weeks after winning the Lakeside title in 2014. But the county system, the inter-county championships, the grassroots pathway, all of it technically remained open. October 2009 brought a moment that changed the outcome permanently. Barry Hearn offered £1 million to purchase the BDO outright, which would have absorbed the grassroots structure into the PDC's commercial operation. Ollie Croft rejected it. In 2016, after 38 consecutive years of coverage, the BBC ended its broadcast relationship with the BDO World Championship, taking away the last major free-to-air platform the grassroots game had. 2 years later, in April 2018, Bristow died. In November 2019, Croft himself died, months before the collapse he'd spent decades trying to prevent. The final BDO World Championship took place in January 2020 at the Indigo at the O2, and the circumstances surrounding it told the complete story. 15% of tickets had been sold. No main sponsor had signed on. Wayne Warren won the men's title and received £23,000, not the £100,000 originally promised. Reports indicated the finalists had no clear idea what the prize money would be while they were actually playing. That same month, PDC World Champion Peter Wright collected £500,000. 2 world champions, same month. One earned more than 20 times what the other took home, and one of them didn't know the number while playing the final. Bankruptcy proceedings followed for BDO Enterprises Limited in May 2020, with losses reported at around £500,000. By September 2020, all 54 remaining counties had left to join the newly founded United Kingdom Darts Association, and after 47 years, the BDO ceased to exist. The county pipeline, the only institutional structure connecting a pub league to a televised world championship, closed with it. Luke Littler arrived on the 21st of January 2007 in Warrington, picked up a magnetic pound shop dartboard at 18 months old, threw his first 180 at age 6 and completed his first 9-dart finish at 13, having joined St Helens Youth Darts Academy, affiliated with the Junior Darts Corporation, when he was 8 years old. At 16, he dropped out of school to focus on darts full-time. By January 2024, still 16, he stood in the PDC World Championship final as the youngest finalist in the history of the event, watched by a peak Sky Sports audience of 4.8 million people. Back-to-back World Championships followed at 17 and then 18, worth £500,000 and then £1 million respectively, and a 10-year equipment deal with Target Darts reportedly valued at up to £20 million. Phil Taylor, by contrast, hadn't taken darts seriously until his mid-20s. Jocky Wilson walked into a pub to fill in for a short-handed team and built a career from that single accidental evening. The distance between those two starting points and Luke Littler's starting point is not a matter of degree. It is a completely different sport in terms of how professionals are made. PDC CEO Matt Porter confirmed the shift directly in a recent interview. It's not players evolving from pub teams to become professional like it was 20 or 30 plus years ago. These are players who are coming through the JDC or through the development tour or through none of that. They've just learned to play by putting a dartboard on the back of their bedroom door. It's a totally different pathway to being a professional. The Junior Darts Corporation, incorporated on the 25th of November 2010 by former PDC player Steve Brown, now runs academies across Europe, Australia and Asia with a belt progression system modelled on martial arts and its own world championship. Played on stage at Alexandra Palace, the PDC Development Tour, launched in 2011 and offering 24 events per year for players aged 16 to 24, feeds tour card holders directly into the professional circuit, with Van Gerwen, Luke Humphreys and Josh Rock among its alumni. Q School opens the door to anyone with an entry fee, regardless of county affiliation or league history. Flight Club opened its first venue in Shoreditch in 2015, now operates across more than 13 UK locations, and has recorded 500 million darts thrown since launch, premium social entertainment at the consumer end of the market, replacing the pub board with a technology-driven experience that costs considerably more than a round of drinks. And on TikTok, the hashtag darts accumulated 3.8 billion views as of January 2024. The 2024 PDC World Championship final drew a peak of 4.8 million UK viewers on Sky Sports, the highest non-football audience in Sky Sports history, with all 15 most-watched Premier League darts nights in the sport's history occurring in that single year. The sport had never drawn bigger crowds or bigger numbers. The pub thrower had never been further from the centre of it. Both ways of reading this story hold up, and neither cancels the other out. The PDC saved darts. That case is not hard to make. One surviving televised tournament in 1989, stagnant prize money, no commercial momentum, against a £25 million annual prize pool, sold-out arenas, and a 17-year-old world champion watched by nearly 5 million people on a subscription sports channel. Barry Hearn is correct when he says the pub game was looked down on. The PDC gave it status, money, and global audiences it had never reached before. But Bobby George's words hold up too. The womb of darts is the pub. Without pubs, darts wouldn't be the game it is. And the thing about George's position is that it's not nostalgic sentiment, it's structural observation. The PDC did not set out to destroy the grassroots game. What it did was pull every major star away from the BDO year after year, place the best darts in the world behind a paywall, and schedule Pro Tour events on weekdays that excluded anyone holding a day job. And the cumulative result of those decisions made the BDO survival economically impossible. When the BDO fell, the county system fell with it. What replaced it is more open in one specific way. Anyone with an entry fee can attend Q School, but narrower in every other sense. The JDC runs dozens of academies. The BDO once oversaw 66 county organisations running through tens of thousands of pubs across the country. One was a sporting elite pathway, the other was community infrastructure, and here is the number that captures the contradiction most clearly. Sport England recorded a 44% decline in competitive darts participation across a single decade, while in the same period, the PDC World Championship final was drawing 4.8 million viewers and selling out every available ticket in 15 minutes. Participation collapsed while spectatorship exploded. The sport became a television event that fewer and fewer people actually played. The pub thrower did not disappear because the sport failed. He disappeared because the sport succeeded without him, and those are not the same thing. Jocky Wilson hustled for pints at the Lister Bar in Kirkcaldy. Phil Taylor walked away from a factory making ceramic toilet roll handles with a borrowed £10,000 and beat the greatest player in the world as a 125-1 outsider. Keith Deller came from nowhere, qualified at 66-1 and beat Eric Bristow 6 legs to 5 in front of 8.3 million people, all of whom felt the distance between that stage and their own local pub suddenly collapse into nothing. That feeling, that the ordinary man and the world champion occupied the same world, was what gave the sport its power. Remove it and you still have a sport, but you have a different one. Luke Littler picked up a dart at 18 months old and joined an academy at 8. He is a genuinely extraordinary talent, and his achievements stand on their own, but his path to the world championship never passed through a pub on a Wednesday night, a chalk blackboard, a money match for a round of drinks. That path closed before he was born, and the institution that maintained it dissolved when he was 13 years old. The pub thrower is gone. The sport he built is richer and louder, and watched by more people than he ever could have imagined. And if you love darts the way it used to feel, there is something in that fact worth sitting with.